Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got an especially enthusiastic review of the Paragon Para X single action OTF. I love this knife. I've been carrying it and using it. A little bit of a bias here because I find single action OTFs to be especially interesting and especially fun to use. So I've really enjoyed this. It's not going to be for everybody. It's certainly not going to be legal for everybody, but prepare for a super positive video. I will go over all the pros and cons and everything and try to be as helpful as possible with, the review, despite absolutely loving this knife personally. I also want to point out that Asheville Steel Paragon was, affected by the recent hurricane. It's my understanding that they are still going strong, so that's great. But if you get an opportunity to support them, obviously do. I will link their knives in general and this knife down in the description. This is a USA-based company, and this is a fully USA-made knife. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. This knife was purchased by me from Blade HQ. I paid in full for it. I've always wanted a single action OTF to EDC. When I say single action, what I mean is instead of, your dual action OTF, probably easier to just get one out and show you. This is the Microtech Combat Troodon. Slide the switch forward, it deploys, pull it backwards, and it retracts. Instead of that, which is admittedly more convenient, this is under much more tension than, something like this. It's got a big coil spring in there. So you basically just push the button and it deploys. How powerful is the blade? Powerful enough to give you a decent poke, but not going to be something that'll send you to the hospital in most situations. The best thing to try and avoid is putting yourself in front of the blade while it deploys, right? The idea with this stuff is not, and I know that most of you know this, but whenever we talk about switchblades, you're always going to have somebody who is under the impression that these are built to hold up to solid surfaces and fire them through. It is not the case. These types of knives are made, they definitely cater to the enthusiast, but they're also made to be convenient, right? Especially the dual action ones. These are incredibly convenient, but no, holding it up to a surface and firing it, not the reason behind the design. And it won't do as much damage as you think, but enough damage that you don't want to do it, right? Anyways, I have always wanted one to EDC because I think they're just really, really neat. And I had set my sights on a ProTech Dark Angel because I loved the symmetry and aesthetic of it. The Microtech Halo is really neat. Honestly, that thing is so unbelievably powerful that it kind of scares me. I'm not sure that I want that thing lying around. I have actually injured myself with a single action OTF as a Heretic Hydra. I accidentally fired it into my hand. And even that thing was powerful enough to kind of scare me. This one isn't quite as powerful, but still plenty powerful and plenty reliable. It has deployed reliably for me. It's also gotten an excessive workout, given how often I've been carrying it and what I've used it for. Most recently, it was out at the pumpkin patch with us, and it's been cleaned up. But this thing released 12 large pumpkins from the ground. And it also occasionally got the blade jammed into the dirt when I would miss or when I, was cut through the stem or something and just kind of just too much power, versus what I needed. It would kind of go into the dirt, which is something we're going to bring up here. But this ended up being a super fun tool and much more convenient than I thought it would be, but it definitely has some downsides. So anyways, let's go ahead and measure this knife. The overall length is coming in at 8.75 inches. Your blade length is coming in at 3.65. Your cutting edge is about 3.35. And you do have two edges here. Two very thick edges. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. So I'll put it up against an OTF, like a double action OTF that people are generally familiar with. It's probably a pretty good, probably one of the best size comparisons for OTFs is going to be the new Microtech Combat Troodon. And the Combat Troodon is a larger knife. Not by much, though. So it's also quite a bit, I believe, $100 more expensive, the Microtech Combat Troodon. So anyways, let's go ahead and put it up against some other common knives. Any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Other. So up against the AD-10 and the AD-20.5. You can see here it's a big knife. It's just, not what I'd call cumbersome. Doesn't feel huge in any way. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? You can see here it is still pretty big, but still a pretty compact item when the blade is closed. And then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue, and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this knife? It's so fun, man. So fun. The way that you get the blade to retract is by pushing in on the button and then pulling this part down. It makes a really satisfying kind of click when it's pulled all the way back into the closed position. You can move the safety up, which stops the blade from firing. One time, I absent-mindedly laid my finger on this button where the safety was not engaged, and it deployed and kind of just made me jump a little bit, right? That is a definite downside to a knife like this, right? You don't want to leave something like this. I can leave a double action OTF on a table in my house. I've got kids. None of my kids are strong enough yet to actuate this, despite the new Combat Troodons being substantially easier to manipulate. So I feel like it's worth pointing out that something that's really, really great about double action OTFs is that they are incredibly safe. It's actually ironic because there are so many laws written to keep knives like this out of the public's hand. And double action OTFs, I would argue, are some of the most convenient and safest blades out there. It's just that they look and sound weapony, but it takes such deliberate force to deploy the blade, which is, just because it's coming out the front doesn't make it any more dangerous, right? And deliberate force to retract it, right? So the downside to something like this is if you've got kids and you obviously put your stuff away, right? Obviously. But if you do leave something like this out and a kid picks it up, yeah, they can touch that button easily and deploy the blade, right? So the other downside to a double action OTF is you have to manually retract it, which does add a significant second step, but isn't really that significant. It's obviously less convenient than just pulling down. But if you're like me, and you just love the idea of being able to push a button and it just throws the blade, it's cool. It's a different feeling than the double action OTF. It just feels cool, right? I honestly kind of like retracting it. I like it. I got to go out of my way to do it, right? And then I have to do it every single time I deploy the blade, but it's fun every single time I do it, right? It also is fun to show this knife to people because most people have never seen a single action OTF, like most normal people, right? So letting my friends, my local friends who know that I always carry some kind of weird knife, letting them play with it it's always fun to watch, right? They're always fascinated by this stuff. The safety does work in the open position and it prevents you from disengaging. For those thinking that the lock might not be super durable, actually it is. In fact, right before this video, number one, I never had an issue with disengagement. And right before this video, I just jammed it into the the framework of my office here just to demonstrate. But yeah, you shouldn't be doing things like this with your knife, but if you do, is the lock substantial enough to withstand that type of force? Yes, definitely. So you're fine. Just don't do anything abusive with the knife. But your standard cutting tests, yes, the lock is more than enough to hold up to stuff like that. And OTF locks in general are actually substantially stronger than people realize. There is a metallic grinding, right? You are definitely going to feel that. Some people really hate it. I don't really notice it. If it rubs on the flat here. It looks like it might have been rubbing on the blade, but it's not because that blade bevel is curved away. So you can see the only parts where the blade could possibly interact would be on the flats, right? If you let go of this, it will spring back out into the open position, but not really with an incredible amount of force. It's really only like from here, like if I let this go, the friction that's created there by the part of the blade that's dragging is not enough for this thing to like explode out. But pulled all the way back, oh yeah. It's always been enough force to throw the blade. After a while, I am 100% certain this will require maintenance, right? This got some dirt and crap in it while I was out at the pumpkin patch. I just blew it out with compressed air and added some REM oil, which is absolutely what you should be using on something like an OTF, and it's just fine. After a while, because this is not open at the back, you will definitely need to take this apart and clean it out, which shouldn't be that much of a problem, right? But that's definitely going to be the case with this or any OTF in general, right? But so far, yeah, it has continued to fire with the same amount of force, and it's been plenty reliable. I don't really have any issues with it. It's really, really fun. So, yeah, some people are going to consider this too cumbersome, too sluggish. Other people are really going to love it. It just kind of depends on what type of person you are, but I love deploying this. I love it. It's so cool, man. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is relatively thick, but because of the shape of it, it's just not a difficult object to carry. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3, you can see here, I mean, it's not a whole lot different. It's just like a long lighter, right? That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel thick. I carried this knife in dress pants one time, and it's, you know, it's relatively thick, but it's made out of aluminum. It's just not a huge thing to carry around. I mean, in a lot of ways, it actually feels easier to carry around than something like the Combat Troodon. I think it's actually lighter. So there you go. Let's go ahead and weigh it. What are we looking at for materials here? We are looking at aluminum and CBM S35VN, which is fine with me. S35VN is 100% one of the best user steels on the market. A couple of steel parts in there. And then we have a titanium pocket clip, believe it or not. That's really cool. In fact, let's just make sure. Yep, titanium. Sorry, you didn't see that, but I was using a magnet. A lot of people will say, well, it could be aluminum just because it's not magnetic. It's not aluminum. They're not going to make the pocket clip out of aluminum, but thanks. 4.7 ounces, not bad. Not lightweight, but not bad. It's definitely a little lighter than the Combat Troodon. It's weird. The Combat Troodon feels substantially heavier, like in my hand. It feels huge, but apparently it's not. This, I don't know why. This just feels a lot lighter, right? But yeah, there you go. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Is this T8? Yeah. So your body screws are going to be T8. There's one right here, and then you have a hidden screw underneath for the pocket clip. Nothing on the fronts. I love how this looks. Super easy. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Blade stock thickness. That's definitely... It's not a thick blade. It's just these style these styles of blades, these styles of knives. Yeah, you get two edges, but they're two super thick edges. Not going to be a performance slicer. You're looking at 125 thousandths, which, again, like I said, it's not thick, but the geometry of the blade is not going to assist you in slicing tasks. Okay, meat and potatoes time. I love this thing. I love the symmetry of it. The only part of the knife that is not perfectly symmetrical is this area back here, which is just designed as like an ergonomic stop, right? Using the knife, is it uncomfortable? There's like a thing sticking out here. There's a button. There's a bit. Actually, all of it is comfortable. This right here is not sharp in any way. In fact, that little rounded area right there, it's kind of a nice dig in, like lock in zone, right? Yeah, your index finger does end up right on top of that button. As long as you have the safety engaged, you're good. I was dead. Those big fat pumpkin stems, like, let me tell you, this geometry is obviously not made for that. What I should have brought with me was my Leatherman Wave with the serrated blade. That would have made that day much easier. Nope, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to carry what I thought was cool, even if it created an inconvenient situation. I wanted an opportunity to test this. This blade is definitely not made for cutting big, thick pumpkin stems. But I never accidentally disengaged the lock, not once, and it did eventually get through, right? The only issue I had is when I would slip and it would go into the dirt. This right here, which is responsible for keeping the blade locked in place in the closed position, is a gunk trap. Oh my God, I cleaned this thing out so many times, right? And in fact, it's probably still dirty. Yeah, it is. That's gonna collect stuff, right? So you're gonna have to clean that out. I mean, like I eventually just had to use a toothpick. I think we went out to eat, and I was sitting at Applebee's picking the dirt out of my out of my switchblade with a toothpick. But yeah, it's a downside to that, right? And it's just it's part of it. A lot of people think that this looks like the Dalton Cupid or the Dalton Arrow, whatever, the Joker knife, right? A lot of people just call it the Joker knife. Yeah, it's a double-edged blade with a slot through it, and it's a single-action OTF. So yeah, it does kind of look like that. There's a lot of those out there. But do I think it's an exact copy? Not even close. No. In fact, I mean, generally speaking, when you're looking at OTF knives, there's only so much you can do within those parameters because they all operate essentially the same way. So many of them look similar. But this was obviously not meant to copy the Dalton whatever, right? But yeah, the edge is held up. So as far as I can tell, this is properly heat-treated S35VN, probably around 60, 61. That's what I would guess, right? This is a US-made knife, so it's not quite as flashy as the Microtech Combat Troodon, right? There's a little bit more complicated machining going in here. And the pocket clip, obviously, on this guy is a little bit more spectacular. But this guy, the Combat Troodon, comes in at $455, while this guy comes in at $350. A lot of people say, but the Microtech is M390 and the Paragon is S35VN. The difference in cost between those two steels, like from these companies buying these knives, the S35VN from Crucible or the M390, or in this case, is it M390MK? Yeah, M390MK. From Bowler, the cost is not that dramatic. It's not that crazy. And if you don't know, Microtech, in my opinion, does not heat treat their M390MK very well. So the performance is actually not as good from my experience, because this is also a knife that I carry. The performance is not quite as good. I would say the geometry is better, but this one definitely lost its edge faster than this guy. This guy still feels fine. In fact, if I have I'll just get a piece of printer paper and show you. It's not going to be beautiful. It's not going to be a beautiful cut, but even after that workout of the pumpkin patch, it's fine. I can still slice with it, right? Flip it over and do the other edge. That one may have gotten a little, no, it's about the same, honestly. No nicks or rolls or anything like that. The M390MK, it feels almost identical, but it is definitely a little bit more dull. Definitely. So I think they're fine, right? I don't want to make the video about, how Microtech should be heat treating their M390MK, but this feels good. It just has a really thick cutting geometry, which is just part of this, this blade, or this style of blade. The only fit and finish issue, because if you're like me, I used to think, like, just from handling like a Warlock a few years ago, I was like, they're cool knives, but I don't think, Paragon's fit and finish is really all that great. This really surprised me. This is nice all the way around. The seams are perfect. The pocket clip looks nice. The blade is almost absolutely perfect, both in terms of the cutting bevel, which is very even, maybe not even back here, right? It's fine. The fuller, or this slot right here, is perfectly centered on the flat in the middle of the blade. The grind all looks great. Any marks you're seeing is from me using it. But the grind lines look great. It's almost absolutely perfect out to the tip. It's only slightly off. And you know what? It is so close. I can't even be mad, because truthfully, my Combat Troodon is not absolutely perfect. Maybe this side, one of these sides, is slightly off as well. And you know what? I looked at all of my Microtechs, and some of them have issues with the fuller not being centered. Some of them have, wider bevels on one side or another, and I've got older Microtechs and brand new Microtechs. So this isn't quite as complicated in terms of like the machining, but it's really nice. It really surprised. This knife was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I was just going to accept it. You know, after I bought it, I was like, if it's a little goofy, like whatever. At least I have a cool single action OTF, right? The power wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be. I was hoping it would be a little bit stronger, but I gotta admit, I don't really need it to be, because every time I push the button, it throws the blade. That's all I need it to do. I need the blade to come all the way out. It does have enough power that it is satisfying and fun to throw, and it makes a really loud noise, right? A lot of people don't like that. They associate this with like a cheap sound. I like it. I think it's fine, right? The blade play, super minimal. In fact, there is definitely more play. Oh my God, it's unbelievably solid. It's almost nothing. There's definitely more play in something like this, right? In the open position, little tiny bit. Closed position, almost nothing. There's essentially zero rattle on this. It's really impressive. Ergonomically, is it like legitimately, you know, is it a really comfortable thing to hold? Yes. I want to emphasize this. Every corner is so beautifully rounded off. It is really, really comfortable. This feels secure. I don't feel like I'm going to drop it. Feels good. It's such a great combination of things, because it is a lot of this, like the reason I like to carry it is just the novelty of carrying a cool, nearly symmetrical, dagger ground single action OTF. But the beauty of it is that everything works really well, and the safety is like, has deliberate, like I feel like the safety's locked out. The button takes deliberate force. Like everything feels high quality, and it's comfortable to hold and use. I like it. Is it less convenient than a standard pocket knife? In terms of, you know, retracting the blade or putting the blade away, yes. In terms of the blade geometry, yes. But it's not that big of a deal. It's not enough to make me go, no, I wouldn't carry this. I love to carry this knife. I go out of my way to carry this knife because it just puts such a huge smile on my face. The pocket clip probably could be a little deeper, but it's not bad, and it's a good clip, right? It's not creating any ergonomic hotspot, and there's not even a screw. They did the screw underneath. There's a little hole back here for, I guess, drainage, right? If you get this submerged or whatever. I think most of the time blowing something like this out with compressed air will get the job done. But that super long coil spring, which I'll let you guys take a look at, that super long coil spring, if we can see in there, is definitely going to collect debris, right? And I would venture to guess, even blowing it out for a long time with compressed air, you're not quite going to get that thing completely cleaned out. But most of the time, spraying some ram oil in there, well, you know, probably if you really need to, and you don't want to take it apart, hot, soapy water, blow it out, and then put some ram oil in there. And that will probably take care of most of your issues. This is going to gunk up that little hole right there. But I really like this. I really, really like this knife. And I thought it would just be like, huh, yeah, that's neat. And then it would go in the box and I would just never carry it. So final conclusion here, is this a knife that everybody needs? No, not even close, right? This knife is not going to do anything special for you that no other knife is able to do. In fact, quite the opposite. You will, as is the case most of the time, be far better off with a standard budget pocket knife right around $50, right? But for those people wanting that OTF experience, especially the classic single action OTF experience, is this a good knife? Hell yes. This is a super cool knife, man. I'm not mad at all at the $350 price tag. It's not as competitive as something like the Kershaw Livewire at $220 or the Guardian Tactical Recon 35, right? But it is a really cool, super well-made USA. This is a small batch company, right? Single action OTF. It's made well. It is dependable. I think it's probably one of the best options out there in this specific category, right? So I think it would have blown my mind if they were down at or near $300. So I can't be too upset at $350. For some reason, I was thinking this was $400, and I must have just forgotten what I paid, because right before I did this video, I checked and it was $350, which I think is fine. So not a knife I'm going to recommend to everybody for a bunch of reasons. It is a big knife. It's a dagger ground blade, which is illegal in some areas, even in the United States. And it's also a switchblade, right? A lot of people like to argue that OTFs are not technically switchblades. They are switchblades, period. That's how they're going to be treated. This is a switchblade. I don't think you can get much more switchblade than this. This is a switchblade. So that's definitely, lengthwise, the dagger thing, the switchblade thing, that's definitely going to get some people in trouble. You can't even own this knife in some places in the United States, which I think is ridiculous. Here in Kansas, we can both own and carry these things. So I have been, and I have really enjoyed it. This knife surprised me so much. It's not going to go in my recommended playlist because the recommended playlist is reserved for knives that I can essentially recommend to anybody. But the reason I have a second playlist called Metal Complex's Favorite Knives of All Time is so that I can still give this thing the attention, or things like this the attention they deserve. It is one of my favorite knives of all time. And it's definitely going to go on that playlist. I love this. This is going to be in my rotation for a long time. It is so freaking cool, man. That's going to be it. I recommend this knife to anybody who thinks like me. And if you made it to the end of the video, you probably know whether or not you think like me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Links for this knife in the description. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.